Well, we're very concerned at the reaction in China to comments that I made, which were very straightforward, which is that we want to be the best of friends with China, we want to trade with China, but we expect all countries that we have internationally binding agreements with to honour those agreements. And we had an agreement between Margaret Thatcher and Deng Xiaoping back in 1984 that protected the freedoms of the people in Hong Kong. And we stand foursquare behind that agreement. That's all I'm saying.
That agreement, the Chinese simply don't reference anymore.
Well, they need to, because it was an agreement that lasted 50 years. It was a very inspired agreement. It allowed the transfer of Hong Kong back to China. And my point is really this: the great success of Hong Kong, one of the greatest cities in the world, is based on the business acumen of the people of Hong Kong, but also the basic freedoms that have been protected. And, you know, the United Kingdom wants to ensure that what was agreed to back in 1984 is honoured for those 50 years.
But you have no means of enforcing it.
Well, we are a serious country in the world, and the point we're making is very simply that if that agreement between the United Kingdom and China was not honoured, then there would be serious consequences. Of course there would be.
You've been accused of making inappropriate remarks yourself by the Chinese.
Well, I've been actually very reasonable with the Chinese. I'm someone who believes that we should be the best of friends with China. I want us to trade with China. I want to have the best possible understanding between two of the great countries in the world.
Should you not actually have dispatched your junior minister immediately to China? Should you not have gone yourself?
Well, we sent the very strongest signal when we had these demonstrations in Hong Kong.
But diplomacy is about face-to-face, getting in there and saying, stop.
Well, I got out there and I made it clear that Britain, one of the oldest democracies in the world, is standing foursquare behind the agreement that we reached with China over the future of Hong Kong. And that is an internationally binding legal agreement. And I couldn't have been clearer that we expect all sides to respect that agreement.
You say there are going to be serious consequences if the Chinese don't change their tack. What are those consequences?
Well, as Foreign Secretary, it's not smart diplomacy to outline what such consequences might be ahead of the situation that you're going to need them. You have to have some strategic ambiguity. But I wanted to make the point that we are watching the situation in Hong Kong very closely. We do consider that 1984 agreement to be legally binding, and that is why there would be those serious consequences if it were ever to be breached.
And you know what the Chinese are saying in response? He seems to be fantasising in the faded glory of British colonialism and in the bad habit of gesticulating while looking down on other countries' affairs. They don't seem to think much of your threats.
Well, all I would say is that I am a supporter of a great friendship between the UK and China, but that means we have to honour the agreements that we have with each other.
But when you talk of honour, you have to be honest. To be honest, we do not have any real mechanism for meaningful consequences.
John, we are a great country. We have a lot of influence in the world, and China would like a good relationship with the UK. We would like a good relationship with China, but we have to honour the agreements we've made with each other.
There are some enormous challenges on your desk as Foreign Secretary at the moment. You have today these ghastly scenes coming out of Libya after the bombing of a camp in which migrants are being held. Scores of people have been killed. Now, that policy of having Libya contain migrants in those camps, i.e. stop the flow, we're, with the rest of the EU, bound in that decision.
Well, we are not bound in the decision to bomb those camps.
No, we're bound in the decision to have those people arrested and stopped. But our responsibility can't just stop there. You can't say, stop these people, arrest them, and then have no responsibility for what happens to them. These people have been killed.
John, with respect, what happened is utterly appalling. But the responsibility for the bombing of a camp with innocent people in it lies with the people who perpetrated this atrocity. And we have been the country that at the United Nations has been working for a ceasefire. We don't believe there's a military solution possible in Libya. We want the two parties to get together. I met the Prime Minister of Libya in Downing Street, and I gave that very same message to him, that he too needs to compromise so that we can stop these terrible things happening.
But this is incredible. You say, and indeed you pay the Libyans, to stop these people coming into the Mediterranean and going across. And then you say, that's where our responsibility ends. No, we have a moral responsibility for what happens after we've paid them to stop these people.
Well, we do have a responsibility, John, because
we
were part of the international coalition that removed Gaddafi, and there is still a very unstable situation in Libya.
That's taking us a long way away from the camps. What is our responsibility?
No, it's not,
it is.
because the situation with migration is also caused by the instability in the political situation in Libya. And Britain has been working night and day to try and get a ceasefire so that we can avoid the kind of terrible atrocities that we've seen today. And that is what my team at the Foreign Office work extremely hard on.
This migrant crisis is worldwide, and it's expressed in the southern states of the United States. And we have seen too, in the last 2 days, these terrible images of refugees in dreadful conditions, migrants who've tried to cross the border. Mexico's been paid to stop them, rather similar to Libya, and they are in disgusting conditions. Children who have been 30 days without a bath of any description, covered in their own feces. You've seen the pictures. This is our best friend, as you call the United States. It isn't good enough. What are you saying to them?
Well, we share the concerns that many people have about these images. We also note that President Trump has signed an executive order on the 1st of July to release funding to deal with those conditions. And, this is a matter of American domestic policy, but as a human being, we hope they're sorted out as quickly as possible.
We've got a huge diplomatic presence in the United States. We've got people monitoring what's going on there. You've known about this for several weeks, maybe a month, I don't know.
We don't agree with everything that President Trump does, but I do agree with him when he says that the alliance between the United Kingdom and the United States is the greatest in history.
Which therefore allows you to say to him,
yes,
will you get your house in order and stop this terrible situation?
Well, he is doing that, and that is why he signed that executive order. But when I stood with him at the D-Day commemorations just a few weeks ago, that, I think, reminded all of us that the last 75 years has been an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. And that alliance between the UK and the USA has been at the heart of that, and I defend that to the hilt.
Now, of course, in the last few months, if we turn now to Brexit, a very large number of Conservatives have moved over to voting for the Brexit party. Do you want them back?
Yes, I do. And the way we will get them back, and the way I will get them back as Prime Minister, is to deliver Brexit. There is no other way. And that means being prepared to do a no-deal Brexit. I don't think there's a big difference between me and Boris Johnson in that respect. The difference is whether we choose the person who is most likely to be able to negotiate a deal, which means that we don't have to have all the difficult consequences of a no-deal Brexit. And as someone who is a negotiator, an entrepreneur by background, I think I'm the person who is most likely to get us that deal that allows an orderly Brexit.
It's been a very divisive matter for your own persona, hasn't it? I mean, if we look at your campaign, let's look at you during the referendum campaign. You campaigned to remain, and you were a fervent Remainer. I want Britain's voice to be strong in the world, and we believe we'll be better off and more secure by remaining. You still believe that?
No, I think we can make a tremendous success.
What happened to that chap?
Brexit. I'll tell you. 2 reasons. First of all, one of my concerns about Brexit in that campaign was the short-term impact on the economy. We had lots of projections
that we'd have right now.
Well, actually, we had projections, if you remember, in that campaign that there would be an immediate slump in house prices. We'd have to have emergency cuts to public spending. None of that materialised. The economy turned out to be much more robust. But the second reason, John, is I am like millions of people who voted Remain, who just want to get on and deliver Brexit because we're Democrats.
That's not quite how you put it at the time.
You've got to let me finish because it's very important. One thing that has happened between now and when I said those words is that this country voted to leave the European Union. And when I go around the world as Foreign Secretary, people have actually a whole lot more respect for us than we sometimes have for ourselves.
Gosh, and try being a journalist. The stuff we find as we go around the world is really embarrassing. They think we've lost it.
Well, just let me answer the question. They have more respect for us than we have for ourselves, primarily because they look at us as one of the oldest and greatest democracies in the world. And they are looking now to see whether, when you have this Brexit decision that much of the political establishment didn't want, do we actually have the courage to implement it? And
so look,
yes, I want to answer your question, because you asked me about how they look at us now. And yes, they look at Brexit paralysis, and they say this is not like the Britain we know. But they don't say you can't make a success of Brexit. They just want us to get on with it.
OK, well, let's look at what your solution was on the 28th of June 2016, just after the referendum. We need to negotiate a deal, put it to the British people, either in a referendum or through the Conservative manifesto at a fresh general election. Do you still believe that?
We had that general election. And in that election, and the argument...
I'm sorry, no, that is not the order of events. You said negotiate a deal and then put it to the British people. We had not negotiated a deal.
No.
When is the election? When is the referendum?
Will you let me answer the question, John?
Go ahead.
Thank you. That article was written, I think, about a week after the referendum result. And what I was saying is that there is a decision to leave the European Union, but we have not, as a country, voted on the shape of Brexit that we want.
You used the word deal.
Let me finish, if you don't mind. So we had a general election a year later in which 80% of the country voted for parties that wanted to leave the single market and, in fact, leave the customs union. So we've had that democratic endorsement of the type of Brexit we want. And now what the country wants...
It's not what you said.
I'm afraid it is, John.
Negotiate a deal. We had not negotiated a deal. If you're going to tell me we had negotiated a deal, I simply don't think we're living on the same planet.
Well, the argument I was making couldn't have been simpler. There needs to be democratic endorsement of the type of Brexit we want. We have that endorsement, and now I, like millions of people who voted for Remain, want to get on and deliver it.
If you want to excuse yourself, but you have changed your tack pretty remarkably.
Because you may have noticed that we had a referendum result in which the majority of people in the country voted to leave. But the statements I've read to you are after the referendum. 1 week after, John.
What about being honest about the economic impact of it all?
I think I've been very honest. I've been very clear.
So you agree with the Governor of the Bank of England and with the Chancellor of the Exchequer that it's going to be at least 90 billion?
Well, I think the Governor of the Bank of England has said that it could be perhaps slightly less, but on the scale of the recession that we had after the financial crisis of 2008. And that's why I want to prepare to mitigate against that in every way possible.
My God, nobody wants to revisit 2008. I mean, after all, austerity came and the poorest people in the country had to pay for the banking crisis. That you wouldn't deny.
That was a terrible recession, and that's why I want to negotiate a deal.
You say you're going to serve under Mr. Johnson if he wins. Is that simply because you want to stay in power either way?
I think after this election, what the people of this country want is the Conservative Party and the Conservative government to come together to find a solution to the biggest constitutional crisis that we've had in my lifetime. So if I win, I very much hope that Boris will be part of my team, and if he wins, I will be more than happy to be part of his team.
And why do you think he's morally fit to be Prime Minister?
Well, that's a question you must ask him.
No, you're the man who has to serve him if he wins.
Well, it's not my job to make comments about the moral character of my opponents, and I think it would demean the competition if... Indeed, I think I'm the better candidate to be Prime Minister, but that doesn't mean I have to make comments about his moral character.
Are you morally better than him?
I don't think it helps this contest, and I don't think it's what the people of the Conservative Party want if we start making comments about each other's moral fibre.
We're sitting in the grand apartments in which he inhabited just before you. Do you leave anything interesting behind?
Not particularly, no.
Well, anything?
No, it was all cleaned up very nicely before we arrived.
He needed it.
Well, you'll have to ask the Foreign Office cleaners.
Foreign Secretary, thank you very much for talking to us.